Hi everyone, Charlotta here, and this is the School of Pattern Cutting, where I help you draft your vintage wardrobe. In this video I'm going to show you how to draft a one-piece 1930s bias top with flared sleeves to your own measurements. And if you're like me, you're always on the hunt for new inspiration online. You might have come across these sort of vintage one-piece garments which always look like you just put them on and you look amazing. And I've always been I find them really interesting, but I'm a bit skeptical. So I thought I'd try one out, and I really like this one because it's quite straightforward. The shape is just triangles and a circle, and you think, how does that work? That's how it works. And then Liz von Willers on her YouTube channel did a stitch along to an original pattern, and it looked amazing. So I thought, it looks great on her. I have to try it now. And I loved her keyhole neckline. So in this tutorial, I'm actually going to show you how to draft it. A basic version like the original vintage one. But I'm going to talk about different necklines and sleeves and how you can change that. And then if you want to find out how to actually fit it a bit more, head over to my Patreon, where I'm going to have a little drafting tutorial on how to add fitting without compromising the vintage feel. But for now, let's have a look at this top. It's really nice. So it's one piece. So it's like a pop-over dress. You just put it over your head. But what I love is it's got flared sleeves. And then the front just wraps around the back. And when the back comes and ties or has a button in the front. But it's all made out of one piece of fabric, and it's cut on the bias, so it's really flattering and has a real 1930s or 40s even feel. I think it sort of was done a few times. So I'm going to show you now how to draft it all. All you need are your blocks, a big piece of paper, and a ruler. So this is the original image I saw, but they've done it. This is attached slip, but you could easily do your pattern piece like this, for example. It comes in lots of different shapes, or if you want to go for this one, you can also just have it straight and then attach a tie, maybe some buttons. So that's always your center front, your center back. So it's a one-piece garment. And these sleeves, you can either keep them as that, or you can make them as short as you want to. And of course, the shorter you make them, the less fabric you use. So you can make the whole pattern smaller if you have less fabric. The one thing which is important, and they've made it really clear by doing a stripe, is that it's always cut on the bias. So it's cut on 45 degrees. So it's quite a straightforward pattern. The only tricky bit is to work out exactly what size to make it, but I'm going to show you that very quickly by using our blocks. I'm quickly going to show you one other interesting thing, because if you, like me, follow Liz von Willers on Instagram, she had a beautiful version of this top, but with a different keyhole. So you can really consider what sort of keyholes you'd like to have. So they've done a square, which I personally don't like because of the bias, but you can have it round, you could have it, so you could have it square like they did, you could have a V-neck, you could have a boat neck, you could have like Liz von Willers, you could have a neck like this, which is quite a nice key hack, Or if you want to stay completely at right angles, you could even have like a really interesting shaped neck like this. I think to stay with the straight of grain is probably quite a good idea. Let's draft this pattern. You can draft this pattern with any size block. I'm using my half-sized small bust blocks. If you're using bigger, a large bust block, you can also do some adaptations for a better fit. But for now, I'm going to show you the basic method, which doesn't use any darts. All the fitting and draping is done by the bias, which is why it works really well in a fluid fabric. On a piece of fabric, I've drawn my center front and center back seam and the bias, just to remind me. Trace around your front bodice, ignoring the darts, and I've placed my center front on my vertical line. And that vertical line is going to be both my center front and my center back, because the whole pattern is made out of one piece, and you only need to cut it out once on fabric too. For this pattern, I normally like to draw everything when do it on folded paper, but here we will need the whole pattern on paper in the end because it's on bias, so we can't really draw it on folded fabric. So you need a large piece of paper, enough to fit your whole bodice, and a bit extra to draw the ties. As I said, I'm not using any darts on this, so I'm now just going to draw around the center back, and I need the center back touching the line, and I also need the high shoulder lines touching. Can you see? And that will give you the most basic look. In theory, you could also add a center back seam and make the top a bit more fitted and the sleeve less flared. But I think the whole beauty of this top is that it's made out of one piece and has these really big floaty sleeves, and it's easy to make and easy to put on. But of course, the joy of pattern cutting is that you can adapt the style. So trace around your whole back, and now you already have the rough construction of your jiffy top. All we now need to do is add the sleeve. We want it to be sort of semicircular and going from the front to the back armhole. I'm going to use my sleeve block to help me work out the semicircle, but you could just as easily draw touching both the underarms and roughly equidistance from your shoulder. So I'm marking a line halfway between my shoulder points to give me a good starting point, and then I'm just going to use my sleeve block to get a guide for the edge of my sleeve. And you can make your sleeve however long you want it to be. I'm making mine quite short, so it's just touching the armhole, but of course you can make it as long as you want it to be. Next, I'm going to draw on the circle. Of course, you want to make a trowel and see how it fits, and then you might want to redraw the circle more curved or less curved. And also you could do a really nice look, for example, where you make it longer at the back, wider, sort of asymmetric. You could try a square one as well, so you get like handkerchief points. But I'm going with the basic sort of semicircle method. If you make it longer, of course, it's going to go further down your side seam, which is going to make it a bit bigger. So you have to be careful. If you make it too long, you might have to reshape it because you don't want a big gape underneath your armhole. So try to stay as close to the underarm point as possible. Next, we're going to draw in our ties, our extensions, and there are just extensions of the waistline. You just extend your waist either side, and then we're going to draw a line at 90 degree to our bias lines, or at 45 degree to our center back and center front. So you can see that line is going to be on the straight of grain, and we do exactly the same on the front. So our front and our back is going to be on the bias, but the side seams are going to be on the straight. Then you can decide how you actually want to put how to finish it. So you can either add a separate tie, which will make the pattern a bit smaller and means you can cut 2 separate ties with your waistless fabric, or you can actually just extend your triangle with a tie. It's up to you really what sort of style you're going through to make and how fussy or how simple you want it. So the next thing we're going to do is just check it's roughly all square, but that's just me wanting to have a square pattern. But of course, depending on your height, your pattern might be much longer, for example. But for me, I'm going to end up with roughly a square pattern piece, which will make it sort of quite nice to cut out. For your neckline, again, you can go with whatever style you want to go for. At the front, I want to avoid having anything on the bias too much because that's going to stretch, which is why a V-neck works really well. The other thing is to do that keyhole style, which is also quite unusual, sort of 1940s, 50s, quite flattering. Whatever style you want to go for, I'm going to keep my back as it is, but again, you could make it a V-neck, so it's on the straight of grain. And then I'm going to keep it really close. And then I'm going to go at a 45 degree angle to my center front, which means I'm on the fabric, I'm going to be on the straight of grain. I'm going to go away again, and then I'm going to go back. So create like a little diamond shape. You can also, of course, create a horizontal line. Either way works well. The only thing about horizontal line is going to be on the bias, which means it's going to stretch. You can add a little button at the top as well as a detail, which would be lovely. And I would probably add a facing to that neckline. And I might even, depending on your fabric, I would probably add some very light interfusing so it sits better. But you can see wherever neckline you go for, it's going to look really nice on the finished top to have a little button detail. And then either a triangle neckline or a diamond neckline. This is your top finished. Now we just need to fold it so you get the whole top. While it's on fold, add your seam allowance, and then you can cut it out on both layers with the seam allowance already added. For your first trowel, I wouldn't even bother about adding seam allowance to the sleeve and the neckline because you want to check it fits first. But add seam allowance everywhere else, pin it together, and then you can cut it out. And your sleeve and your neckline will be probably the main points where you want to get your fit right, and also the height of neckline and the sleeve length. So that's all the drafting done. I hope you liked this tutorial. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. I'd also love to hear from you. Have you tried any other vintage one-piece pattern? What do you think? Did they work? Did you have to adapt them? I'd love to hear from you. I'm planning the 1 hour dress from 1920s next, so any experience would be very much welcome. If you want to find out how to actually put this top together, head over to Liz from Villa's YouTube channel. I've put a link in the description below, and she got a whole tutorial how to stitch it together, and she also styles it and it looks fantastic. That's it for me for now. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and whatever you do, keep on drafting.